people don't know who an expert really is. How can an owner really understand who's really qualified to give nutrition advice for dogs?
It depends on what you want.
Some of the questions I get are like, well, I don't really trust my vet giving me nutrition advice because, they don't have that specialty in nutrition. So what is the truth there? Like how many hours do normal vets get trained on nutrition?
Some programs themselves don't have a dedicated course on animal nutrition. So that's kind of some of the challenges that we see and that we want as a specialty. We're trying to just make that more standard and just increase the amount of time and the amount of training that veterinarians get even before they graduate. Most common nutritional deficiencies take a while to show clinical signs. So you could be feeding an animal 6 months a diet deficient in a specific nutrient and not see any differences. FEDIAF and AFCO are not enforcing bodies. So if I say that I made a food, start selling it, say like, oh yes, according to AFCO is not going to call and find me out and make sure that I did it right or not. It has to be based upon request. Or a complaint.
What can the implications be of feeding your dog a food that doesn't have that kind of people formulating it?
The first one and the immediate for everyone to be aware.
Welcome to the Daffy Podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert.
Francisco, welcome to the Daffy Podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
Thank you.
So, Francisco, the first question I have really, and I ask that quite a lot to my guests on the podcast, is why is it that you love dog health and nutrition so much? Why are you passionate about it?
So I think in general, I had that thought before deciding to specialize. I work in different areas as a vet. After I graduated, I worked in production animals. So I worked in pig farms for a while. And then I had more time to work in small animal clinic, seeing consults. So it's kind of more regular veterinarian. But both, if there was something I found in common, was that nutrition was so important. It was on every case, there was something to be discussed about it. Sometimes may not be the main focus of the conversation. Like there would be other aspects that were maybe more important at that specific time, like what medications, what could be done. But I found that for most patients, there was something that could be addressed or proved or at least talked about nutrition. And I got to learn a little bit more while I was there, and that's how I got attracted into it. And the more I spoke with my friends that were like in different experiences, they were saying, like with my colleagues, one of my mentors when I was working in farms used to tell me like food is everything. Like if you feed these animals the right food, they'll grow and they do well and they perform well. If you cut costs there, that's when you're going to start paying off. And that also not related just there. That was in production. That was in like what we were doing for producing food animals. And once I went into practice, it was a similar thing. It was always important to get into that conversation. And then even more interesting was to see how much care there's usually involved and how important feeding our pets is for an owner, for a pet parent now we call them.
Yes.
So it's just, I think probably one of the main, like if you think about it as a chain, like that bond that we have with our pets, one of those really big ones is feeding them. And I see it with my own dog. It's like, it's a really weird, like very strong feeling when you see them eating happily what you're feeding them.
Yes.
It's just a particular joy to see them eating what you're providing.
Yes, absolutely. And from your perspective, what is your background? What is it that you kind of like studied and what do you specialize in?
So yes, I am a veterinarian. I trained in Mexico in the Mexico's National University. Then I worked in different areas, but then I decided to specialize, so do a specialty training in clinical nutrition. So I went for that to the University of Guelph, and I did a 3-year program, which is a combined program, a doctor in veterinary science. So it has some research aspect with a clinical residency with the European College of Veterinary and Comparative Nutrition.
Amazing. And that's great. So essentially, you're a vet, but you have like expertise in kind of small animal nutrition. So I can have like a proper conversation with you about nutrition, not just a general one, but an in-depth one. And you can help me with that, basically.
Yes, that is correct. Like if you want to think about it, actually, in both in vet medicine and in human side, when you go to a specialist on any areas, it's sometimes easier. Nutrition is kind of one that sometimes is a little bit blurrier the line. But my specialty would be the same as when you go to a neurologist. If you have a really hard case for something that like the regular veterinarians like may prefer to send to someone that does specifically more of those cases. That's kind of the type of specialty I got.
Yeah, that's amazing. Correct. And I love it because I love to talk to not just a nutritionist, but also someone who is a vet and understands both sides. I think that's really powerful, isn't it? Because you can kind of go from understanding chronic illnesses and, you know, when a dog is really poorly, but also you can think about what can we do from a diet perspective to help this dog. And I think that kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about today, which is how can an owner really understand who's really qualified to give nutrition advice for dogs? Because there are so many people out there with so many different qualifications. People don't know who an expert really is, right, in this field, because there are just so many layers to it and so many different type of qualifications that someone can get. And so if we start with something simple, when we say pet nutrition or animal nutrition professional, what kind of people are we actually talking about?
So somewhat of a hard question. And I was thinking about kind of this, it depends on what you want. I would say that's probably what it is. What are the goals of that advice you're looking for? I think you described that really well. For like, we can start from the one that is closest to me, and that's what I'm. And I would say that in all transparency, aspiring to be, I'm presenting my specialty exam later this year. After I pass it, hopefully, then I'll be fully qualified. And that's like, it has a fancy name that our specialty would be called a board certified nutritionist. So that term, it varies a little bit depending on the country, but at least in the US, for example, that's a registered name. So no one can call themselves that unless they have this specific qualification, which means they're a vet first. So they're a licensed veterinarian that did a specialty training for one of the two colleges that are recognized. So it's the American College and the European College. They both kind of have similar programs for that. And in general, there's small variations that could happen, but this means that they have at least 1 year of experience, which means a rotatory internship or equivalent experience. And then on top of that, at least 3 years of specific training on clinical nutrition. That means that they went to a place where they only saw cases related to nutrition, and they use medicine, or they kind of combine the medical knowledge with giving nutritional advice. Yes. So the profile that gives you is, we are the specialty, reach out to this type of specialists, like any of these colleges, for where you would really advance knowledge or advice for animals that are sick. Yes. So anything that is, or a pet that has a combination of problems that have specific dietary requirements that exceeds the regular nutritional knowledge from a general practitioner or from a family veterinarian, that's when they would get referred to us. So yes. That is kind of the very specific case that we would use. And then that means that we combine everything and try to find a solution for those pets that are usually very sick, or they have a really complicated case. That's usually kind of what it works, or kind of what it would be our specific role. Yeah. From there, it kind of each specialist decides to go into different places. Like in my case, I decided to go for a work for industry, like for a pet food company, or there is other, or they can just go in a hospital, a referral hospital, or have their own business to be a referring.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And so how much does a vet get trained on general nutrition? Some of the questions I get is the owners are like, well, I don't really trust my vet giving me nutrition advice because, you know, they don't have that specialty in nutrition. But we do know that vets get some kind of basic training. So what is the truth there? Like how many hours do normal vets get trained on nutrition?
That varies considerably between programs, and that's probably where this comes from. And it is something that, like, it is discussed in the profession that it should be more standardized and just have all programs having, and obviously as a nutritionist, I fully support that, increasing the knowledge sometimes it's the knowledge and sometimes it's the confidence of the veterinarians and giving nutritional recommendations, and just, it goes related to time, how much time do we want to add? I would say, I mean, I probably don't have a specific number because it's so variable, but I can tell you in my school, we had one semester where we had one of the classes that was focused on biochemistry. That goes really, and kind of that was basics. Then the next semester we had nutrition, or like general nutrition. It was more like learning about the kind of how nutrition works in the animal, more of the kind of the basics still. And then we would have kind of part of the other combined lectures where we had medicine for small animals. Then we will have some topics on a specific, like more clinical nutrition. So it kind of was building up from there. I think most programs have something similar, but some programs themselves don't have a dedicated course on animal nutrition. So that's kind of some of the challenges that we see and that we want as a specialty, I would say. This is my opinion, but that's my interpretation of what I think the colleges think, is that we're trying to just make that more standard and just increase the amount of time and the amount of training that veterinarians get even before they graduate. But it is they are supposed to at least understand what are the basics and where there's specific conditions that the standard of care actually involves nutritional management, so that they should at least know those.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's
that makes
enough.
perfect sense. What I heard talking to vets is there are so many things that they're studying all the time. And if I'm really passionate, like you are passionate about nutrition, but if I'm really passionate about cardiology, like skin, like I want to become a dermatologist or an oncologist for dogs and things like that, they want to become vets because they want to help sick animals, as opposed to nutrition is more seen as a kind of like a preventative way of helping animals. You told us like what your specialty is. What other nutritionist specialists are out there that people can trust?
I would say kind of the ones that work, I mean, often closely together, or at least that I had contact with in my training program, was a PhD or like a postgraduate studies nutritionist. That one would be someone that has done usually, and actually we'll back off a little bit with that. The term nutritionist itself alone, without adding the board certified, all of that, that is not a registered brand, or like there is no, or at least for animal nutritionist, there is no specific registration that you have to do in order to call yourself a nutritionist. Like that's kind of, anyone can realistically do it. It's just, it is more responsibility of who's looking that advice to look at the profile of that person and see if, well, what do they mean by calling themselves that? So I will start with that one. Now, the ones that we're talking about specifically in this case is the ones that have got postgraduate education on animal nutrition, and therefore they're nutritionists this way. So in those cases it's kind of different levels. They start usually with an animal science background. Sometimes it could be animal science and nutrition, so they could even be nutritionists starting from there, depending on what projects they got and what lectures they had during that program. And then they go for a postgraduate study, which it means they go for a master's, and then after that a PhD, or even postdocs after that, related to animal nutrition. So those means that they have a lot of knowledge for research. Usually they have a very strong background on research, and they know lots about the science and the metabolism of animals. And in general, those programs are directed to just increase the knowledge. So they have because they have such a strong research component, means that they have a specific topic where they know even more than a lot of other people. So they have a core, or most programs have at least a core base of knowledge, and then they go to their specific, depending on the research projects they have. The animal nutritionists like that, like a PhD animal nutritionist, they're often, they could be found at universities, they could be found in just kind of doing more research, or they could be involved in pet food industry. So they're usually, as part of the program, they may have some training in pet food formulation or in formulation, and then they can formulate, like they can kind of combine ingredients to create pet foods that are going to be sold after. So usually they're involved in those. Not necessarily everyone that formulates pet foods are going to have those qualifications. They could be also someone that has training on the food science which is a different profession, but they also have the specifics on, well, these are the requirements for an animal. They really understand, they know a lot about the ingredients, they know how to combine it, they know about the processes, and then they can formulate too. So there's usually a combination of people that can do that.
Yeah.
Some, and since I already mentioned formulation, I'll just include what we do as a veterinary nutritionist.
Yeah.
We are usually trained on formulating homemade diets, so like how to recommend a specific tailored diet for that, or how to select a diet that is already kind of designed for a therapeutic choice. So that's what we do. We know kind of what are the requirements, what are the specific changes that the requirements change, like the requirements for a specific disease modify, and we select a diet based on that, either if it exists or it doesn't exist. That's the type of training we have.
Like
Not
kidney
necessarily-
disease, for example, it's like if a dog has kidney disease, it's like, what type of diet should that dog be
Yes.
eating? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And then if there's a combination on top of kidney disease that needs to be added to that, well, then we also consider that too, and just find the diet that approaches the best that way. Not necessarily by knowing that we are the best ones or we have enough training to do the other type of formulation for, let's say, for a pet food that is going to be sold for animals with kidney disease, because there is other components that are related, and that varies because of the type of ingredients, because just it's very different to make food for one animal than making food for hundreds. You know?
Yes.
So, or thousands. And the process that it may be involved for that, and all of the changes that happens between the formulation to when it gets delivered to the final pet, that is something that these other professionals can actually consider, and they probably have more knowledge. So there's different functions. Doesn't necessarily mean that one company is going to have only one of each. Usually, especially the larger companies, they have multiple of each one that work together to make sure that if this diet is going to be designed for these animals that are sick, the PhD nutritionists will consult with a certified nutritionist to see if that is correct, and they agree on what is best, and kind of there's collaboration from that. And then they also consult the food scientists to make sure that everything is delivered in the right way. So it's like a network of collaboration. I'm talking about like large pet food manufacturing, especially for therapeutic.
Yeah. A question for you on that, right? I'm a dog owner and I'm looking to change my dog's food, and there are hundreds and thousands of companies out there that, sell dog food, whether it's fresh, raw, kibble. From your perspective as a dog owner, what are the things that I should be looking at when I am reviewing the website, and I want to feel confident this food is being formulated in the right way, and I want to feel confident that my dog is going to digest that food and is good for all life stages and things like that. What are the things that an owner should be looking for when searching for a company that they want to trust?
So the first thing, and that's kind of the very, very basic, even if you don't want to remember anything else, would be a nutritional adequacy statement. That sounds very fancy, but it's that little sentence somewhere in the package that says this diet is formulated, and you said it right, for a specific life stage. It usually would say all life stages. That means that it's a bit like it's a diet that is formulated for growth of adult animals and lactation and pregnancy. So that's all life stages. So it's kind of all the stages that a diet can be used for an animal. If they they could even say adult maintenance of a dog or a cat, or they could even say growth for cats, dogs, or they could. That just basically would be the ones or reproductive stages too, like lactation and pregnancy. They probably would include that. It's rare that you see ones that specifically have those, but that is based on the nutrient profiles that are required by organizations that kind of not dictate, because that's not the right word, but that publish those requirements. Usually those would be AFCO, the American. I always
Animal
remember
Association
the name
Control.
American. It's American Association of Food Control Officers. I always had it wrong, so I should probably remember that.
Right? FEDIAF is for the European.
Yes, FEDIAF is the European.
Yeah.
Yes. So those would be Association of American. That's the one I always say wrong.
Yeah,
like it's not American. Yeah.
So many words.
Anyway, yes, but it's AFCO. That's the easiest one. You normally see it like that. And then that's the very basic. They should include that for the pet that you're looking for.
Yes.
If you wanted a more extended evaluation, there is actually tools that can guide you through that. So there is the WSAVA, which is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, has a checklist for how to choose a pet food. And that is kind of a list of questions that you would ask, quote unquote, so you can find in a website on what the pet food manufacturer, kind of what are their qualifications for selling this food.
Yes.
And that one usually involves asking some questions like, who is behind that food? Do they have an animal scientist behind, like a PhD nutritionist or a postgraduate studies nutritionist behind that diet? Do they have a board certified nutritionist in the staff? Like kind of who they have that can help them make sure that those diets are formulated or they're made how they're saying they would be. Without getting into many specifics, because there's more information. The pet foods, the nutritional adequacy statement is different types. There could be one that is by formulation. That is, that diets, like they combined ingredients, calculated that or looked at, compared that versus the requirements dictated by or mentioned by AFCO or FDF, tried to meet them, and that's how the diet is made. That's one option. The other one would be this diet is according those requirements, but is by a pet food trial or by a feeding trial. That is, this diet was not only formulated to meet that, but it was also fed to a group of animals for at least 6 months, the specific requirements for the feeding trials for both FDF and AFCO. So the statement may vary a little bit on what it says. It just means on how advanced that was, if that diet has been tested, or if it has been more like it's just the formulation itself and it didn't
done that. Yeah.
To be rest assured, if it's formulated according to either one of those, both nutrient requirements from AFCO and FDF are also considering the standard processing losses. So some nutrients may be a little bit degraded by maybe staying on a shelf or by mixing them together or by cooking them if it has to any kind of cooking process. So those standards are already accounting for some of that or for most of that.
Yes.
So if it's formulated, you can tell that for most animals that will still meet the requirements, at least on paper. If that gets delivered or not, that's a different story and that's a different conversation, but at least on paper, those are intended to already be there. And those are based on the nutrient guidelines provided by the National Research Council.
Yes.
So at the NRC. So the last publication was 2006. So from there, AFCO and FDF kind of adjust that to account for the standard processes for pet food production.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. It's great that you broke it down like that. And I think the thing that is for me very scary is I see every single day, at least in the UK, but I'm sure it's the same in the US, companies that put food on the market. And then when you go and look at the company to see who's behind the formulation, there is not an expert that has a degree. They say, okay, we work with a vet or we work with a dog nutritionist. And that's for me really scary because I'm like, well, food can go out there, can be put on the market for these dogs. Yes, we call it, FDF or AFCO complete and balanced, but there is no one like the experts that you've mentioned that should really be behind that formulation. But the food is on the market, This is the kind of awareness I'm trying to spread, because if you can't give me a digestibility trial, you can't give me any other testing that you do on that food, and you can only tell me is FDF complete and balanced, but it's not formulated by anyone who actually has a degree to be able to formulate. That's scary, isn't it?
It is scary, and it goes a little bit on people understanding, and you say it entirely right. Both FDF and AFCO are not enforcing bodies. So if I say that I made a food, start selling it, say like, oh yes, according to AFCO is not going to call and find me out and make sure that I did it right or not. Usually it will be another entity that actually checks that that's right and that is true, like making sure that the consumer is receiving what they have. But then it goes some kind of more the enforcing part. It depends on the regional the regional entity that is either in the country, if it's in Europe. Here in the States, it depends on the states, but it has to be most of the times, and this is probably the most important thing, it has to be based upon request, or a complaint. So if no one complains, or if people don't look for those things exactly as you're saying, the enforcing bodies are not going to chase them because it would be impossible. There's so many new products. I think someone mentioned one, so I heard that number. There was 300 new pet food products a year more in the market, I think, in the US, and that's probably staying short. That is including new brands, new product lines. They're like, everyone is always innovating. It's always, which is great. Like we do get more knowledge, we get more options that way. But it would be absolutely impossible for anyone to enforce to make sure that every one of them is actually meeting how they should be. It's not like that. So if kind of the advice that we could potentially give, I would probably give is like, if you find one of those that it looks a little bit suspicious, maybe just put a letter somewhere and see if they can actually be checked and if they're meeting the or just being kind of a role as a consumer, just checking that that's happening. And
yes, what can the implications be of feeding your dog a food that doesn't have that kind of people formulating it?
the main one, I mean, the first one and the immediate for everyone to be aware, and the simplest one I can give you is, it's not even related to nutrition. It's you're paying for something that is not true. No, it's fraud. At least not meeting what you're buying. Is like, well, you're just buying something that is not what it's supposed to do. So that's kind of the very basic one. No? It's like, well, you're not receiving a product that is saying the truth. And then the next one is if it's actually, depends on what it is on there. It could be there's something off completely. So even some nutrients that are listed as the minimum as a requirement for metabolism, given in excess, they can be toxic. They can turn into something negative, or the other way around. They could not have enough of something, and then eventually would cause a problem. And I say, and I will point out eventually, because that is also another misconception. Is nutrition, for the most part, or kind of most common nutritional deficiencies, take a while to build up and to happen and to show clinical signs. So you could be feeding an animal 6 months a diet deficient in a specific nutrient and not see any differences. But you may be feeding it for a year and not see any differences. 2 years after, well, things start looking weird. At that time, you already thought that, oh, it's not a diet because I've been feeding this for a while and this is not happening. Like, it's still
That
okay.
is such a good point that you're making there. It's such a good point, because I see that all the time, right? Like, or a dog, for example, all of a sudden getting cancer or allergies or some kind of autoimmune disease and things like that. And no one ever really links it to nutrition. It's always something else. So like, when a dog is really old and they start getting like lots of liver issues, no one think, okay, have we fed that dog a little bit, I don't know, too much protein throughout his life or something like that, right? Something that his kidney are not functioning properly anymore and things like that. But no one link it to nutrition. And like you said, it's like it can take years. And sometimes, dog might be genetically a really healthy dog and can deal with it until like it's very old. But sometimes that's not the case. And I think we should switch a little bit from a reactive kind of care to a proactive care. It's like, if I know I'm doing the right thing and that food is really meeting all the requirements and I really trust that company, then I feel better, because I know I am giving my dog the best. And at least from a nutrition perspective, hopefully I'm not going to see any of these issues like excessive vitamins and, the implication from giving too many nutrients or too little nutrients, basically.
I think that is right. And it's such a complex. It's not saying I'm not trying to overcomplicate what I say, but in general, it's like many nutrients, the way they work is they're, I don't know, depending on which one, they have many different functions, no? And they all interact with each other, and that interacts with the pet genes and the pet metabolism, and it interacts with their environment. It's hard to say, oh yeah, because I feed this for this many years, that caused this problem. Maybe not. Like, it's hard to just blame. We like to, and as humans, we like absolute things. And the same in medicine. It's like we want to say, oh yeah, this is what. Nothing is right. At least in biology, nothing is as strong, like a hard line. But it may be a factor. Like, yes. It is a player in there. So it does have a role. And it's always remember that it would be an important one. And if something I can say kind of truly as a nutritionist, like without failing, is that we are what we eat. That I think is that I do believe that is true. And that one is, if you want to know the technical bits, is we are made of basically the amino acids that we ate in the protein that is still rechanging, and we are changing into what we just ate. So that is true. How that plays in the long and the short term, we probably don't know, but that is true. Or if I gain weight with eating specific fats, that probably means that what I'm storing is that I ate, and then eventually it would come out. There is some, like, research has shown that is true, that we are what we eat, because we are changing all the time depending on what is circulating in our blood. Like, our molecules are kind of renewing themselves. So that is true. What the implications are, well, that's what research is trying to prove, and we have some knowledge about all of this, just to keep it general. But yes, that is right. And I would say some of the main risks is to not fall into the oversimplification of things. So that is a very risky game, and even vets, we could fall into that, saying like, oh no, this is always negative, and this is always wrong, or these type of foods are wrong, these steps. I think everything is probably just a wide shades of gray. It's never black and white. And we have to just evaluate the whole knowledge behind what is there, and just not blindly follow anything, because that may change. And that happens in science all the time, whatever we assume that is truth,
Yeah.
one day, the next day, it could be completely wrong.
You get disproven, and it's like there is a new
Yes.
piece of research or a new
Yes.
study that comes out, and you're like, that was not what I thought it was, or like
Exactly.
that. But it's true that you can see it with, like, I mean, I'm seeing now there are like a little bit more studies coming out about fresh diets. Like 10 years ago, there was none of that. And sometimes, it might be that in 10 years' time, fresh diets are proven not to be that healthy for dogs. What they might do, but it changes all the time. And this is why I think there is so much confusion and conflicting advice out there about it, because there is just so many information from all over the place. Like you're in the US, there are people doing research in the UK, people doing research in Australia, right? And sometimes it's not all linked, like in one place. And that's, I think, as well, the problem, isn't it? And then you got some experts out there, some expert over there, and it's just like a little bit all over the place. And the problem is everyone feels so overwhelmed because they're finding themselves in the middle of all of that. It's like, but all I'm trying to do is I want my dog to live a long, happy and healthy life. And I want to know how to do that in a really simple way, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert. And they're always trying to look for ways to learn that in a very simple way. And I think social media is kind of good and bad for that, because you go on social media and you find all sort of information and misinformation. I think that's why everyone is just so completely frustrated, because it's like, I don't know who to listen to. Do I listen to the science? Do I listen to holistic people? It's so hard, isn't it?
I think that's right. And with that one, I think the risk is also to not make really hard statements. I try to avoid those as much as possible, but also thinking of what the situation they are in. And
Yeah.
I think, I fully agree with you, it can be overwhelming to choose, but if you have a healthy animal that your dog or your cat is healthy and happy and everything's going fine, you may have time and you may explore other options. Like that's probably still valid, or the type of advice that you can look for is probably going to be less specific. But kind of the main difference is when people become a little bit more desperate is when something is going wrong. That's when probably where you should be looking for is looking at the medical professionals that have specific training on that. And with that one, it's you may not need to go all the way to a veterinary nutritionist, because not every case realistically needs to go to the high specialty. I would say maybe they do, but just to give more work to our colleagues or my colleagues, but not necessarily that's the truth. Like a veterinarian may have enough knowledge and training, and even some veterinary professionals kind of that are working with veterinarians, there is specialty nurses that have that training in nutrition. There is other type of professional that could be involved that can give actually really good advice for most patients that have a disease and they have a condition, but it's when they have a problem.
Yes.
So when they have an issue, you go for a medical professional. If they're healthy, then you have a broader option of people that you can ask for, and that's when you can choose.
When we say broader option, would you include, like, I have taken like a few courses on, dog nutrition. And look, I know there are loads out there, but I felt like I have a good understanding. I will never be able to formulate, and I will not even want from far away to formulate, but a general dog nutritionist that has never gone to uni to study animal nutrition, what is your view on that? Like, would you listen to advice from those experts as well for general nutrition advice that's got nothing to do with, like, sickness or actual formulation of diets?
I think as long as they're giving sound basis, I don't have any issues with that, because they still have a role, and they may have even a broader audience. That sometimes there's people that have an aversion of receiving advice from their doctors, or from like people that we sometimes struggle to speak the language for a lot of people. No, we cannot translate the knowledge in the easiest way. So they may be able to provide good advice, especially for healthy animals. I wouldn't be concerned as long as we're covering the basics. That's kind of what we can say. But I don't have a particular issue with that and with receiving advice from them. Where I would start, and I would probably point out those red flags, is when you have those statements like, "Oh no, this one is the best," straight off. That's probably a red flag. Saying, "Oh, this one, you should always avoid that," probably a red flag. Like when you start seeing that someone says really strong truths,
statements,
except for like what you said about covering the basics, but yes, for all the other ones and that's when you may doubt a little bit more, because they may sound very logical, and the risk of those is that they can be really good at transmitting a message. But just not because it's simple and not because you can clearly see and stand it, that necessarily means that it's true. And one of the examples that I put on that is when someone says that the earth is flat. If you look at a window, usually actually it looks that it's flat. Well, there is places, I live in Kansas, so it's really flat. So if someone was going to tell me that I'm here, that is, I probably think, oh, well, it sounds logical.
I love that you're using
I would have to think that that's
nutrition statement.
Yes. So
I love it.
Just because it looks like that, and someone told me that in that specific case, well, it maybe sounds true. No, but then when you zoom out, like if I was gonna jump on a, I don't know, some kind of rocket and see from the outside, then you see that it's actually not when you have a broader view. And that is the risk. It's just when you don't have enough of that knowledge, where you can fall into those traps of, well, at the end, and I would say that, again, in all honesty, all of them may have some kind of commercial interest. The same, everyone is still, like, not, sounds bad, but like everyone still wants money, you know, like everyone still has to survive. Everyone still makes money out of all of this. So big pet food companies make money. Smaller pet food companies, they also make money. So unless you get your food for free, then I would say, well, question where that's coming from. No, there may be some kind of commercial interest behind, and not because they're smaller, that means that they have less interest. If anything, they're probably more desperate about it than a bigger one.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, that's when you need to be careful. But I think it's like, as long as, but statement wise, I'll go back to that quickly. It's like, when to dog owners, this is like example, like kibble is gonna kill your dog, or cereals or wheat is gonna kill your dog, or your dog is gonna live 2 years less because you're giving them cereals and things like that. That's the type of statements I think you're referring to. It's like, no, that's not true. And I get it completely. And I think you're right. I think there are loads of people that have commercial interest, but that's you find that in every industry. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, it's about understanding the basics around what a dog really needs, nutritional and things like that. And so that's the most important thing. And then it's also like really understanding. I don't think anyone will do this job to harm dogs, right? I think
that's true.
No one that works in this industry wants to do any bad by selling their products. I think some people just generally believe in their products. There are so many different, so you've got conventional vets and then you have holistic vets, right? And there is so much disconnect between the two. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, why do you think there is so much disconnection? Like, I'm a vet, I'm a holistic vet. I still study veterinary school, but I became holistic, the way I treat patients and I look after patients. And then you have a more conventional vet. Why do you think there is so much disconnect? And why do you think these two kind of people can work together to try and help the dog?
So that is a hard question, and I would point out this is all of my personal opinion, not
absolutely,
not the company I work for or the universities I've trained at or the people I've worked with. But still, I think I'm going to start with that word, and on my personal view, I don't like the word holistic. And that one I would say I don't like it because it has been used for so many things, and it basically have diluted the meaning that it had originally. Mm-hmm. Holistic, I think in every language, even in Spanish, it's my native language, it means that it covers a whole.
Yeah.
So not because you use conventional medicine or medicines doesn't necessarily turn you into a non-holistic vet. If you're covering the whole aspect of your patient, you're actually holistic too. So it's used as almost as a synonym of unconventional medicine. And that is kind of where things turn. But that's a different thing. Not necessarily because, and I think that the broken part is that it's more seen like associations with negative, there's a negative perception from either side, from the veterinarians that do alternative or they do other methods that are not kind of the usual standard of care, or they combine that. Well, it's seen like, oh no, you're just following everything like a sheep, no, you're just following the rules. It's like, you're not thinking outside the box. So that's kind of how they encase everyone that does everything by the rules. But then on the other side is, well, you're also doing things with no evidence. And then when you think about it from a kind of even more objective perception, is on both sides, the evidence that they may have is actually softer than you think. There is not because someone, like a researcher, really high researcher said it and found it. If they did one study, that doesn't mean that is the truth. It needs multiple testing to make sure that becomes truth. And that's going to be truth for probably the majority of animals, but not all of them, because this is biology and animals don't read the rules. No. So they may still do something strange, or there may be still adverse effects. So like understanding that both sides have that aspect is probably where they could join, and there could be value from both. Like I think where they could be coordinating as well. Let's say if an alternative medicine veterinarian is using different herbs, is using different, just a different approach. Well, a lot of drugs actually came from extracts from herbs. So it's not that they're fighting each other. It's just that they're approaching it a different way. Like that doesn't mean that the other one is completely without science. It's just that the way that they do it. Again, it's falling into extremes where it can be like, well, if your dog has, I don't know, this horrible condition, and it has, or let's say even easier, it has a very nasty infection. Well, probably you're going to need antibiotics for that. You will need to recur to
you need to fix the problem now.
Yes.
Basically, I mean, I see a lot of the allergies, if I need to be honest, where we are especially. I have loads of poodles that I see all the time scratching and itching and things like that. But it's just like, and what I see is we fix it with, Apoquel or Side Point, the usual stuff that is going to help now, to help them now. But then what's not there, and I promise you, this is what happens every single day. I see it because I run a doggy daycare and boarding business. And so I have so many of these clients is they get given this drug to fix the problem now. But what they don't get given is the advice to try and understand how can we fix the problem overall, right? And try not to get your dogs to be on antibiotics or drugs for the rest of their lives. But actually, whether it's allergies, whether it's food sensitivities, whatever it is, how can we just fix this as a whole? And I think this is what's missing from, at least in the UK, the vet kind of world, right? I, can go to the vet, they will give me a fix. My dog will be fine. I know that for sure, right? It's when you have more of a chronic issue, that it's either, okay, keep him on steroids or do this or do that. But it's never like, but what is happening with this dog, right? Is it the environment? Is it food? And honestly, I think if there were more vets that could just do the overall thing, exactly like you said, reactive, but also preventative, right? That would be the perfect word, right?
I agree. And I think you mentioned something very important that is making me kind of realize what part I was missing to mention. And that one is, it's always, or most of this comes from it's a communication gap. And with that one, I mean, we may think that the vet is not doing as much as they can, but they probably will. They could be actually doing it. Let's say that example that you mentioned, like it ends up in a specific medication, like steroids, like any kind of medication for that condition, or antibiotics. If there was enough of that communication back and forward with the pet owner, so they understand why is the vet recommending that? Yeah. Why are they sending that? Or just by sending the medication, like, oh yeah, take this, it'll fix it, or it'll keep it, and then keep giving it for life. If we don't understand that, if we don't see what is their vision, or what was their thought process to actually make that decision or make that recommendation, then we can see if they're actually doing everything or not. And with that one, what I mean is, if we were going to spend as vets a little bit more time, like maybe a few minutes, or maybe just explaining, like, I'm sending this because this is what your dog needs, because this is what I think they have. Yeah. And this is the only thing I can do. The other options that we can explore are this. But maybe they're not the best ones because this region is unlikely to have these allergens or whichever. So you just communicate with the pet owner that this is the reason why you're prescribing that. And then maybe I'll see you next year because I think this is a seasonal problem. Or your dog needs to stay on this medication forever because it has as you said, it has a chronic illness that it will require this medication for life. This medication may even cause these problems. This is how we could combine treatment. This is what you could do to help them. At the end, explaining both ways, I think, is what can fill up those gaps. Yeah. And when sometimes alternative medicine can actually fill up those gaps because they're willing to spend that amount of extra time explaining things in a way that the other person can understand. Yeah. And with that one, it's not always the vet's fault. It's also, I think it's a two-way part always. So there's nothing wrong with asking your vet, like, why are you prescribing this? Or could you explain a little bit more on what it is we can do? Or is there anything else I can do? Is the diet I'm giving the best one? Is there something that I could do more for my pet? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with asking back.
Yes.
At the end, they are providing you a health service. So you can actually, and they usually, most vets actually would receive it well. It's like, oh yeah, I'm pretty excited. Like they would like to have that conversation and
That
closing that
explanation.
relationship with their client. It's just that we see that, and that's, I mean, I try to never be like that when I was in clinical practice, but to be too cold and be like, oh yeah, prescribe this and
Yes.
it'll be fine, we'll fix
Yeah.
it. When you do that, it's usually when there is those misconceptions and you think like, oh, the vet just wants my money, they just want to sell me these drugs, and or they just want me to pay for this. It's like that communication is actually part of what we're charging for. Like it's
Yes.
our time to explain, and we went to training precisely so we can actually explain
Yeah.
our clients why are we prescribing these things. Why, like, they may not understand everything, and that's where extra training can go in how to communicate better.
Yeah.
But that's where the spots for where miscommunication leave is where all of these half truths that we're talking about can come
Yes.
into play, and they can say it's not this, is you should go and feed this obscure thing and that would fix all your problems because he does this and this, and they spend a little bit more time and it's like, oh yeah, that makes more sense than what I was told, because what I was told is just give this pill and you'll fix it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we can fill up those gaps. It's just communicate a little bit more, and from both sides, just ask more questions.
I think at the end of the day, I mean, I feel bad for vets because they really generally have very limited time for consultations. They don't have, some of them have got 15 minutes, like, and that's a fact, you know, like they're just running like crazy all the time. And I think it's like, again, if I think I put myself as an owner, right? Like 3 years ago, I mean, my dog is on a fresh food diet, right? But 3 years ago, it was on kibble to start with. Then he went on a fresh food diet. And that was me doing my research. And I was like, actually, this is the best choice for my dog. And when I go and try and validate it with the vet, because obviously my vet opinion is really important. And I want to validate what I'm finding online with them because they are looking after my dog. What I found is, as a dog owner, you will get loads of pushbacks. Like you said, there was not much explanation. The explanation wouldn't make sense because they didn't take the time to explain it properly. And I think you get left as a dog owner and you're like, it goes back and they're like, just put him on the old, keyboard that he was on before, because that's the best thing for him. But they couldn't have that conversation with me about diet. That really made me feel confident. I should have listened to them to feed him that type of food. And so at the back of and this is funny enough, this is one of the reasons I got into nutrition, because I was like, there's got to be someone that can explain it to me in a better way. And then I started to learn, well, actually vets are not nutritionists. They don't spend years studying nutrition. So, sometimes they try to cut you off a little bit because they don't really know a lot of the information. And sometimes they don't really know how to answer your question. I just feel like it's really hard because if there were more people that were a little bit more, like you said, open to talk about and explain you things a little bit better, but also, qualified to be able to explain the things in a way to make you trust that vet, basically, and not to having to have like left that feeling of I need to go online and find information there because I can't trust my vet.
That fully makes sense. And I think it's always, I mean, going back to that when I've been in that position where you're very limited on time.
Yeah.
Like some of the things that you can do is maybe if you don't have the time, but maybe one of your nurses may have a little bit more time that they can spend with their client, or maybe someone else from the staff on the clinic, or you can refer them to certain resources. There's no way, like the problem is when you leave them with the gap, the knowledge gap, and that communication gap is where they're going to try to fill it up somewhere. If it's not the vet, if it's not coming from there, it'll come from somewhere else. And that could be online, that could be and I can see how, and as a vet, you have really bad days and you're really frustrated, and then someone comes and asks, if there's anything I could be feeding, or is there something else I could be adding to the day? It's like, well, that may be your favorite conversation where you're already behind on schedule, and but it's just trying to understand that there will be a gap of knowledge there. And that could eventually lead into a decision-making from the client, which is decision-making is, I'm going to change the diet to whatever I want. I think it's very important just to know that there is other options too. And from anyone, it's always good to know that, well, you're not alone. And this could be a collaboration thing. And if you don't have the time or knowledge about giving specific advice, well, refer it to someone that knows. There's nothing wrong with saying, well, even as a vet, like that's what I did in practice. I don't know enough about cardiology. I don't know enough about this specific, like this condition. I've never seen it before, but I know that it's related to the system. So I'm going to send you to a specialist, an internal medicine specialist, or I'm going to refer you to someone that knows more than me on that specific topic, or probably on all of them.
Yeah.
They can give you that extra knowledge that you need, and they can help you guide that decision. They may come to the same conclusion. It's like they may say, oh, just keep the medication that your original vet sent.
Yeah.
But then now you had a discussion, that you know that this other specialist may have already been able to explain, why are we sending this? Or at least give you, these are your other alternative options, and this is what could happen in each one. At the end, you're still the one that makes the decision to change the diet or not. So it's just at least having the information there. That's probably what is the most important part. And what I would encourage people to do is just ask the question. There's nothing wrong with it. Just say, like, could you just tell me a little bit more, even if it's Dan or someone else, who else can give me more?
Yeah.
And the same as from the vet side, is like, well, if I don't know, just refer or provide with a resource, because that leaving that space is where things can turn a little bit different. And again, it just always depends on the situation. There's nothing.
Yeah, and like you said, it's always gray. It's never black and white, and this is why it's so difficult, And that's the reality of it. Every dog is different, and that's what we really need to understand. People need to understand everyone has their own dog, and I can have a Cavalier and another Cavalier, but they can be two completely separate dogs with two completely separate issues, with two completely separate diets. And I think that's another thing that, that's why it adds a layer of complexity to it. Because if it works for my Cavapoo, it might not work for my Cavalier. And people think, but why is it not working for my dog? Because it's different, because they've been bred differently, because they live in a different place with a different environment. The food they eat comes from a different country. So there are so many different layers to it, basically. And I think sometimes that's what people don't really understand straight away. I love that. I know we've been talking a lot, and I did tell you we were going to be done in 45 minutes. One last question for you is, if a dog owner or someone is feeling overwhelmed with all the nutritional advice out there, what would be one piece of advice from your side and from your experience?
So I would maybe start thinking of what is your situation and what are your needs first. So what are you looking for? Do you have a sick animal that needs advice? Like, are you desperate for a sick pet, and like this is a very sad situation not to be there. Then you need a medical professional. The same as if you had a sick person at home, or you were sick yourself. It's like you're going to look for a doctor. So it's just find the right doctor for that. If what you want to do is more like something more specific for your healthy animal, then just knowing what are the qualifications, how comfortable are you with the knowledge that the person you're going to ask for, like for advice. I think that's kind of put it in perspective as if it was for you. So if you want to, I don't know, if you want to do any changes in your own diet, well, you may, but you're feeling fine, you're healthy, you just want to improve a little bit. Well, you may be fine with an article online, or you may be fine with receiving advice from someone else close to you. That would be fine. If you're looking for maybe something more specific, or a more specific goal, it's like, oh, you want for growth, or you want for, well, maybe you need a little bit more advanced. So then that's proportional to the qualifications that you'll be looking for the person that is giving advice, so that's behind that product you're looking. So kind of just match up your needs with the level that you want, and that would be probably how I would do it. Not necessarily that's the right way or not.
No, I love it. But that's a great point, isn't it? Because you never think about it that way. But actually, now that we understand a little bit better the different type of experts out there and why they are who they are and what they can help with, that makes perfect sense. And I love that. Yeah, it's great. I mean, look, I could be talking for you for the next 10 hours, but we don't have the time. But yeah, honestly, I really, really, really love today's conversation. And I love to do potentially a P2 in the future, because I think, there is so much people can learn from you.
Thank you. This was really, really interesting. It was really good fun for me too.
Amazing. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to Daffy, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.